Today I will be ranking all the builds I played this league, during the league itself and all events that ran in 3.27. Turns out I played 10 different builds in SSF, which I will be scoring on league start viability, mapping, bossing and fun. This isn't too serious of a video, it is more of a retrospective. Maybe you'll be inspired by some of these, who knows. If you're new here, consider subscribing. I will link all the original videos in the description. Those also have the POBs, plus way more context, so check those out if you like that particular build. And without further ado, let's dive into the list. Number 10. Foulborn Fire Chieftain. Just like the next entry, this was mostly a failed experiment, trying to make the Foulborn Exhaust Nurture work with its level 30 Immolate affix. Despite trying a bunch of different combinations and skills, this Chieftain was never able to make a dent in much of anything with not even 1 million DPS, and on top of that, it wasn't all that much fun to play either. It did kick off an interesting and quite popular Foulborn Roulette series, which may make a return next league, so I am grateful for that at least, but otherwise there wasn't much here. League start viability 2 out of 10, this isn't a starter build at all. Mapping 5 out of 10, bossing 1 out of 10, there was 0 single target damage, and fun 5 out of 10 if I'm generous. That makes for a total of 13 points. Not great, would not recommend. Number 9. Foulborn Cast on Crit Rolling Magma Inquisitor. Another failed Foulborn experiment, trying to make the Foulborn Sire of the Shard work, which is a unique that adds a bunch of extra chains to slotted skills. While it was fun to experiment with, it ultimately just didn't surmount too much of anything. I did make a few mistakes while testing this build, most notably not including the Snake Pit, which stops projectiles from piercing. That would have definitely made certain skills more viable, but even after testing that ring after the video went live and after I read all the comments, I wasn't convinced. It ended up doing high red tier maps quite comfortably, but was rather slow, not very tanky, and had no single target damage. League start viability, a 3 out of 10 maybe, but just don't do it. Mapping I would say is 6 out of 10. Still, it wasn't horrible, but you would need a cast on death portal setup. Bossing a 2 out of 10. And fun, I mean, it is a fun build for the most part with all the projectiles going all over the place. At least I think that is like a 7 out of 10 fun at least, docking several points for dying all the time. And that brings the total score to 18 points. It is not terrible. Number 8. Foulborn Cold Blade Vortex Elementalist. This build was centered around the Foulborn Skin of the Lords, which gives 30% quality to socketed skill gems, which prompted me to put a bunch of golems in there for massive golem bonuses, and then I played Blade Vortex converted to cold damage for massive AoE and screen clear. A very fun concept, great to build around. It is a template that you can use for a wide variety of skills, this golems package and this unique. It should work on a lot of stuff in that sense, and ultimately it led to a rather squishy but otherwise very effective mapper boasting a healthy 3.7 million DPS and screen-wide chill and freeze. It's time to score because this build kinda speaks for itself, I feel. League start viability, it's not at all league start viable. Not only do you need the Foulborn unique, the build has several other uniques, including an Ashes of the Stars to hammer home that quality stacking and a taming, so this isn't a league start friendly build. 2 out of 10. Mapping 9 out of 10. It's very good at mapping. Single target 5 out of 10 maybe. It is not made for bossing clearly. And then fun, for me a 9 out of 10. The cold explosions and screen wide AoE are just so satisfying, and that brings the total to 25 points. Number 7. Foulborn Shot Saboteur. This build centers around another Foulborn, the Foulborn Rebuke of the Val, with tons of flat damage and trap throwing speed. For a trap I ended up using Spectral Helix of Trarthus, Shot, and this build was surprisingly good in the end, thanks to a lot of interaction with the chat while streaming. Other than the unique weapon and the skill, there isn't all that much to say about this build, as for the rest it's mostly a generic trapper, I feel. I'm not necessarily great at making builds. These are all just builds where I start as a character and see how far I get. There's very little theory crafting involved and basically no theory crafting up front, so it's also a surprise to me if things work out, but I enjoy this process a lot more than spending hours in Path of Building. To each their own, right? That said, it's time to score, and for League Start viability, it is not that hard to League Start this. You can run Heist for the gem, you can level using other traps, getting the weapon in SSF will be rough of course, but there should be plenty of substitutes as well. So if you want to start this, it is like 5 out of 10 points. Should you though, and that is where it is more of a concern. While it does surprisingly well for what it is, in my opinion, I am not sure this is the build that you want to League Start with. Mapping is not bad, but not great, a 7 out of 10. Bossing is decent, I would say, also a 7 out of 10. A single target is definitely there, but overall damage requires significant investment. Mapping is a little slow, and while I do think you can get 4 Void Stones with this, there are plenty of builds that are less clunky than this one. Fun, therefore, I think a 6 out of 10. It is still a trapper, which just isn't a great archetype, and that brings the total to 25 points. Number 6. Foulborn Dancing Dervish Guardian. This is a minion build that focuses on the Foulborn unique, the Foulborn Dancing Dervish. This is a great item which summons 2 dervishes that cyclone. They do lightning damage thanks to the Foulborn version. Building around this was a lot of fun, experimenting with this was a lot of fun, and once you have them up and running, that is also a lot of fun. These guys are pretty fast, have good range, good AoE, clear the entire map without much of an issue, and it is a fun twist on an otherwise fairly standard minion build. It's got 2.3 million DPS, clearing tier 16s was smooth, however with only 30,000 effective hit pool, tankiness can be a bit of an issue if you want to do something yourself as well, plus if you want to trigger the dervish on bosses there is dominating blow in there, so you may raise a few more minions and start the skill. Another advantage of this build, permanent rampage, adding to the fun, which brings me to the score. League Start viable, well it is not as bad as you would think, assuming you have the weapon. The regular version by the way is very common, you can just start with that. I equipped the weapon as soon as I could and it works pretty much straight away, because you can socket 6 support gems, so these guys will do a bunch of damage basically from the get-go. So assuming you have the weapon, League Start viability is like a 5 out of 10 because you still need to find the weapon of course. Mapping 8 out of 10, very smooth. Bossing 6 out of 10 maybe, they can kill bosses. It's not great, but damage is there and it is consistent. 4 Void Stones may take a bit of time, but I think it is doable actually. And fun, I think a solid 8 out of 10 for me. As a minion and cyclone enjoyer with constant rampage, this is the best of both worlds. Well, maybe. That brings the total score to 28 points. Number 5. Foulborn Death's Oath Occultist. We're entering the top 5 and it's going to be surprisingly close. This build is a very well-known build, and while I put a little bit of an SSF spin on it, 2 Spectres and some original uniques, there is nothing too much out of the ordinary. I, however, had never played with the Death's Oath, which is a chest piece that gives you a Chaos Dot aura, which this build scales in various ways. The Foulborn version provides Wither effect, which is just extra DPS and strictly better than the original. But the original you can target farm with div cards, and it is a super common drop, so that is a good starting point. Back to my version however, I didn't expect to have so much fun with this build. I suppose technically it is not better than Righteous Fire, which is the obvious comparison, and Righteous Fire probably scales better into the endgame with more investment. But I would argue it is more fun than the RF Chieftain, because these explosions are just next level and it is a 0-button auto-bomber. You could put in another skill like Caustic Arrow or something, but I didn't do that and I was completely fine. I even managed to craft myself a Headhunter, by which I mean gamble myself a Headhunter, which is a beautiful combination, this build and that belt. I'm still playing it sometimes to just run a few toxic sewers and get dopamine from the chaos pops. So, scoring. League Start viability, actually more viable than you might think. You can just start another Chaos Dot skill for the time being until you farm a Death's Oath, and then you should be off to the races. But on the other hand, to really have the build be online, you also need an Elder Amulet and maybe 1 or 2 more uniques. So to call that League Start viable is maybe a bit of a stretch. 5 out of 10. Then mapping, 10 out of 10. This build is made for mapping. Even Delirious maps it does reasonably well, as the explosions work based on monster life. Bossing, terrible, 3 out of 10. And then fun, 10 out of 10. An auto bomber in toxic sewers with these sound effects and headhunter buffs, I mean, come on. In SSF you don't get to see this every day. I liked it so much that I've actually made a guide for it recently on Mobalytics. I will link that in the description. And that brings the total to 28 points. Number 4. Blood Magic Shield Crush Juggernaut. It is not a Foulborn build this time, this is just a regular wheel build. I will start by stating that Shield Crush is probably better on a different ascendancy. Juggernaut just doesn't do a whole lot of damage, but I hadn't played a Jug in a while, so I went for this, knowing it wasn't optimal in terms of damage at least. I was surprised however by this skill, which I thought would be clunky, but with some attack speed and AoE it feels surprisingly smooth to play, and if you can get your hands on a shield with tons of armor and evasion you will hit very hard as well. I played this in a League start scenario, so my gear wasn't all that great when I made the POB, but I managed to get 4 Void Stones, had around 2 million DPS, 88,000 effective hit pool, and the overall quality of life of a Juggernaut. This was a very smooth, solid League starter. Not very fast, not a shitload of damage, but just solid. Let's give it a score. League start 9 out of 10. I did League start it. It is simple, easy, straightforward, no respecs required, no transfigured gem, scaling is evident, and I got 4 Void Stones. The only complaint is the speed. It just takes a little longer than some of the other builds on the list. Mapping, a 7 out of 10 at least. Damage is the main culprit here, but once you have that, clear speed is not half bad. Bossing, I think a 7 out of 10. Not because of the single target damage, which isn't great, but because you will be able to face tank almost any boss, which is underrated, but I will give points for that. Not dying also means more DPS in the end. And fun, I mean for me kind of fun. Not the most fun, it is a little boring, this skill I feel. It doesn't have a satisfying pop or explosion or sound effect, but you know, it does the job. 7 out of 10. So that's 30 points in total. Number 3. Foulborn Flamewood Searing Totem Hierophant. The Foulborn Searing Touch Searing Flamewood Totem Hierophant. A bit of a mouthful, but it effectively boiled down to having 13 Searing Totems with the Flamewood support, which, if they got hit, those totems, bombarded the enemy with Flamewood artillery, decimating pinnacle bosses. This thing has 13 million DPS on very achievable gear. This became an accidental uber killer, did 80% delirious maps without issues. It was pretty tanky too, and very fun to play. Despite all that, only number 3, partly because other builds are even better and partly because it has some very obvious flaws, which brings me to the scoring. For a League start, it is not really League start viable with the setup that I ran with that Foulborn unique, but it is very League start viable with just Searing Totem and Flamewood, and then you can just gather the pieces as you go along. Plus, this build concept works also with other totems and other gear as long as you put Flamewood support on a totem with a lot of health, as it skills off of that, or on a bunch of totems, ideally both. That said, I'm feeling a 6 out of 10 League start viability. And then mapping. It can clear basically any map, 80% delirious, tier 17, it doesn't matter, because the damage is ridiculous and it skills pretty hard as well. The main issue isn't damage, it is the clear, the AoE and the speed. Still, it does anything, so at least a 7 out of 10 for mapping. Bosses is kind of a similar story, because it kills any boss you want, but it only does damage if the boss hits the totems. Most bosses hit the totems, but a boss like the Maven, that might take a while, so it is not consistent in that sense. When it works though, it works very well, so I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. And then fun. I think this is a lot of fun actually, mostly because I was not expecting this much damage out of Flamewood support. If this doesn't get nerfed next league, or even better, if there is a way to damage your own totems, this is a great contender for an uber boss killer, especially in SSF. So fun, a 9 out of 10, and that brings the total to 30 points, tying with the Jug. Number 2. The Glacial Cascade Miner. This build I played actually recently in Frisia, but this is still relevant for 2 reasons. 1. The Scavenger may just be a Cyan Ascendancy next league, the signs are there, meaning you can simply play this. And 2. The build creator I followed, Smokey_777, also has this build working on an Elementalist, and it performs just as well by the looks of it. It's a powerhouse, this build. I cleared uber bosses with it in the end from a League start scenario. It is a smooth mapper, decent League start progression, progression, just a great all-rounder and a great league starter. The build itself is straightforward enough with mines that spawn glacial cascades, and then there is some more advanced tech to get significantly more damage, like the miner belt from one of the Zana bosses, the Incarnations. It will lose damage with the loss of grafts, so there is that, but perhaps the new league mechanic will make up for that. Besides, this build had a lot of damage anyway, you can miss a little bit. Time to score. With the least points in my opinion this build gets for the league start. While very viable, there is a bit of a respec. You need a transfigured gem, which may take you a few hours to farm, so it is not a 10 out of 10, but it's still a solid 8 out of 10. Progression, once this build is online, is also super smooth. Mapping, a 9 out of 10, with only docking a point, because the build itself isn't very fast or zoomy, but it clears incredibly well. Bossing, 9 out of 10, just amazing damage, but you will die here and there. And fun, I think also a 9 out of 10. It's got very satisfying gold explosions, one of the best sound effects in PoE, and seeing how fast this build progresses endgame is quite fun too. This brings the total to 35 points. Number 1. SRS Guardian. It's probably no surprise that my own SRS Guardian is at number 1. It is the build I played the most, the build I've put the most time and hours in, and so naturally I'm a little biased towards this build, but I will give it a fair score in the end. This is a minion build obviously, but as you can start playing it from level 4 all the way till Uber bosses, which I did this league, I think around 6 days into the league in SSF. It's just very powerful, much easier to get going than its poison SRS counterpart, and while specters remain a bit of a nasty thing to deal with, recent quality of life changes to specters and animate guardians have made minion builds a lot more bearable in my opinion. If you watch my channel, you know what this build is all about. I will be updating it again for next league as well, which includes the Mobalytics written guide, and I will most likely league start it, as it is kind of my staple build to experience a new league. Time to score. For league start, I would say a 9 out of 10, docking a point for specter management and requiring a bit of gear to get to 4 void stones, but you'll get there pretty easily. Mapping, 9 out of 10. SRS with movement speed and animate guardian that has an SNF touch and melee splash has a surprising amount of clear speed in maps. Bossing, a 9 out of 10. The only thing not bringing this to a 10 is the damage, which at first won't be as high as for example the Glacial Cascade Miner. However, you will be much tankier and generally a little safer as you don't have to aim anything. Fun, subjective of course, but let's say an 8 out of 10, as minions are an acquired taste and you may be bored of them at this point. I'm not though. That brings the total also to 35 points, meaning the Glacial Cascade Miner and the SRS Guardian share first place, which I feel is only fair because you can destroy the whole game with both builds in SSF as a league start scenario, and I've proven that with both of these builds, as has Smokey with her build. It is more of a matter of preference. The SRS Guardian is more work to maintain with all the minions, does a bit less damage, but is tankier and easier to scale from start to finish. The Glacial Cascade Miner I think gets the feared down a day or two earlier perhaps than the SRS Guardian, but requires a mining playstyle. You will probably die a bit more, and getting started can be rough with the transfigured gem and some key unique pieces, which can be a pain to target farm in SSF. But that's it guys, I hope you found this video enjoyable. It's a bit of inspiration for league starters perhaps, but I will make a video with a few picks I feel are safe picks in SSF in a league start scenario after the patch notes. The top 2 builds and this one will be in that video for sure, barring any nerfs, and then I will think about a few more staple builds that you can choose for hopefully a smooth progression in 3.28. Thanks for watching, don't forget to like and subscribe, and with that said, love you all. See you soon. Bye bye.